dive in.
Yeah, two of the most notable players from last season in particular, and I believe the last time they actually faced against each other was at the North American International Championships. It was the last round of Swiss on day 2. Winner would likely advance on to the top 8 and the loser would be eliminated, and Zackary defeated Wolfe back then. And so, you know, it's been many, many months since their last encounter, but should make for a really interesting game as we look at the teams here. There's actually only one Pokemon in common between the two teams. That's going to be Incineroar, but Zackary actually opting for a very unique Trick Room team here that also features Golden Go as well as Hatterene, which we haven't seen much of today.
We really haven't, but this is kind of part of the hard Trick Room teams that we have seen floating around, so we'll have to take a look at what those Hatterene details are in just a second. But let's hone in on Wolfe's team here. I feel like these are all very common pieces when put together, but the one thing that you were pointing out to me even before we got into this match is that Fluttermane is Calm Mind in this situation.
Yeah, you know, I talked to Wolfe before this event, and he said, well, last season I spent a lot of time kind of trying to figure out strategies around really obscure Pokemon. And for this tournament, I want to focus on just figuring out how to win with the best Pokemon and how do I basically optimize them for my play style. So I think Calm Mind Fluttermane going up against Hatterene is one of the most interesting tools here. It's not a move that we see very frequently on Fluttermane, but when paired with double Fake Out support from Rillaboom and Incineroar as well as grassy terrain recovery from Rillaboom, it can be an absolute monster.
Yeah, there was also the Sword Stance on the Ogerpon, so I think that's another way you can really boost up damage on this team. But taking a look over at Zackary's team, there are so many different things to call out here, but I think the first thing that jumps out at me is that Hatterene is a light clay with Reflect and Light Screen.
Yeah, immediately when I saw Zach's team, I was like, what is Hatterene doing there? Like, there's no NDD, right? So he can't click Expanding Forest. I've never seen Light Clay on Hatterene before, combined with screens, but it's so fascinating because you're paired with this Ursaluna, you're paired with Golden Go. Both of those Pokemon really appreciate having the screens. The Amoonguss here also has Pollen Puff to heal its partners, and notably, we've been talking about stat boosts. Well, it's got Clear Smog, so it can actually get rid of any Calm Mind boosts from the Fluttermane as well as any Sword Stance boosts from the Ogerpon. One other thing to call out here is Porygon 2. That's not a Pokemon we've seen very much of so far in this tournament, but I think it's really underplayed and it can do a lot of interesting things. This is actually a set with Trace instead of Download, which is more conventional as well. So Zach has a lot of surprises. There's also that Eerie Impulse on Porygon, making it harder for Fluttermane to really thrive here.
There's also Flying Terra Blast on the Porygon too. Cannot wait to see if that actually comes into play. I feel like there's 3 very prime targets on Wolfe's side that you might want to actually have that Flying Terra Blast for, but there's only one way to find out one of these players can maintain their undefeated run in Charlotte, day number 1 of Swiss, and they will secure a spot in day 2 of Swiss with a victory here. Zach is going to lead for this first game with the Porygon 2 and the Incineroar, and Wolfe is going to bring the Incineroar and the Farigiraf.
Yeah, so Farigiraf here, quite the nice lead just to block this potential fake out immediately. It traces the Armor Tail. Okay, already some shenanigans here from Trace, and of course that is going to bypass the fake out from Wolfe's end, and so not going to be able to click fake out there. Wolfe trying to play really aggressively here, going straight for knockoff onto Incineroar and Hyper Voice. Knockoff a really key move for Wolfe to have in this matchup because getting rid of Eviolite from Porygon 2 is a very, very big deal.
Yeah, we're going to see the parting shot, though, first. So it's just going to go into the Farigiraf. Not really too much of an issue here. When you know the Farigiraf has the Throat Spray, it can kind of get that special attack back up into neutral. But this does allow Zach to get a pivot in for something else that might want to try to utilize that Trick Room. And it is going to be the Ursaluna.
Yeah, Ursaluna, however, is going to lose its item here. We saw Knockoff go into that slot. So Hyper Voice here won't do that much damage with that great parting shot to start. But Throat Spray, get it back down to neutral. And Incineroar here, of course, critically will be able to remove the Flame Orb here from the Ursaluna. So damage isn't that great, but getting rid of Flame Orb is big because if Ursaluna had his Flame Orb activate this turn and Trick Room gets set up, the Ursaluna can just start KOing everything.
Yeah, it's a really big like neutralization of damage. I never even thought about that before, that you could just knock off the Flame Orb before it gets the burn, and no longer will you have Guts at your disposal. But the Trick Room does get set up here, so Porygon 2 is able to get that off. But that's why I feel like the Farigiraf in this instance is really interesting to have.
Yeah, totally. I think being able to reverse Trick Room is a huge deal. You saw Wolfe was considering it just now. You know, Ursaluna still has the ability to go for a Sword Stance right now, right? And so it would instantly increase its damage output, but Wolfe brought the Rillaboom in the back, and so Rillaboom becomes really scary. And so Zach's already taken a fair amount of damage and hasn't actually gotten very much off with it. It's going to be Golden Go coming out now as the adjustment.
Ooh, okay, so we now know what all 4 of Zach's Pokemon are for this first game. And despite the fact that he got the Trick Room up in that first turn, it's just going to be a full pivot with the Golden Go coming out as well as the Incineroar to get another attack drop. This will critically start to lower some of the damage of the Incineroar if it were to go for something like that knockoff once again, but it's going to be a parting shot to get yet another pivot. It's going to be a very big positional game, especially knowing how good both Wolfe and Zach are at that positional game.
Yeah, position is going to be so important in this matchup, and it's a great opportunity for the Ogerpon now to come out. I think Ogerpon is probably the most important Pokemon in this matchup for Wolfe. It is able to set up with Sword Stance. It does massive amounts of damage to everything, and the fact that he was able to get Ogerpon out and reverse Trick Room when Incineroar just hit the field means that you don't have to worry about an Intimidate, and Frigoraph still protects the Ogerpon from Fake Out. And so Wolfe looking to just play a little bit aggressively right now. Still hasn't even taken any damage yet. This Golden Go critically is Fairy Terra, so can't really defensively Terra that well. You can Fairy Terra to survive an Ivy Cudgel here, but you're still very likely going to get 2-hit knocked out. And so really great control by Wolfe so far in this early game.
It was good awareness, though, from Zach to be able to get the Golden Go in, maybe anticipating a Trick Room reversal. So at the very least, you do have Golden Go to do some amount of damage, but what are you really doing in response? It's just going to have to be a Protect here to try to get another chance to pivot around.
Protect there, definitely a risky play because Ogerpon had the opportunity to go for a Sword Stance, but Wolfe opted to just go for damage there and ends up getting a huge parting shot off here. This is now going to reduce Ogerpon's attack, of course, by 1, and now you can pivot Incineroar back in and out for a potential second attack drop, and so a Golden Go actually in a really good spot now. This turn was really pivotal. I think if Ogerpon goes for Sword Stance, things can get a lot scarier immediately.
Now Porygon 2 is back on the field to tank a little bit of damage, and it's also going to trace the Armor Tail once again. Psychic, though, from the Frigoraph is just going to continue to chip away at this Porygon bit by bit, and this Porygon does have Recover, so you have to worry about that, too, if you're Wolfe, letting the Porygon stay on the field too long, or just have room to try to reheal itself.
Yeah, so you can see Wolfe thinking about going on the offensive, saying, okay, I've already actually done a lot of damage to Porygon, so I'm going to just try to knock out your Trick Room user right now here in this moment. So, one of the interesting things to pay attention to in this matchup is that Flying Terra Porygon. You could Flying Terra, Terra Blast into Ogerpon, but Ogerpon, by going for Terra, not only gives you a nice offensive boost, but you also get rid of that grass typing. So I think it's the perfect time to go for this right now. And Zackary critically did not switch into Incineroar this turn, so no Intimidate onto this Ogerpon.
Yeah, so now it's going to be back to neutral. Right? I'm trying to keep track of all of the boosts and drops that we've had so far, but the Embody Aspect will be able to get that attack back up to neutral and should be able to deal quite a bit of damage there. But it is going to be a Terra on Zach's side as well, and it's the Golden Go that's going to take on that Terra Fairy.
Yeah, so it feels like Zach has to basically commit to Golden Go in this matchup, right? Like, the Ursaluna is going to struggle here because there is no Trick Room at this point in the game. So we're going to start off with an Ivy Cudgel here, but it makes sense to Terra the Golden Go to make sure you just don't faint this turn.
Porygon 2, wow, it is going to take that damage pretty comfortably as Golden Go goes for the Nasty Plot, hoping to weave in just an extra bit of special attack boost here.
Oh.
That looked like it might have been a little close.
Yeah, I was wondering if it actually survives there and Porygon manages to get a Trick Room up, that could be a complete disaster because then Porygon can just heal back all the damage with the Recover the subsequent turn, but very critically does get the knockout on a Porygon. But yeah, that looked really close.
Yeah, it does look really, really close here. Maybe you get a chance to get the Incineroar back in.
Yep.
You still can't go for something like the Fake Out because the Frigoraph is on the field, but you do have the opportunity to drop this Ogerpon's attack by 1 stage again, and that might allow this Golden Go to survive.
Yeah, I think Incineroar definitely the right call here. Ursaluna honestly feels like dead weight for Zackary at this point. You don't have your Flame Orb, you don't have Trick Room up, there's not much that Pokemon can offer. I'm sure Zackary's actually probably thinking, okay, even past this game, is there a better option I could bring? Like, I think Hatterene could actually make for a really interesting case so that you have 2 Trick Room users. But at this point, I think if for Zackary to win, it's all about this Golden Go right now. It's about deciding when do I click Make It Rain versus Shadow Ball versus Nasty Plot, right? Like, because Wolfe does have a bunch of Pokemon that actually resist the Make It Rain. You have the Ogerpon, you have the Incineroar as well. And so a lot about this is trying to maintain a position. And Incin is just such a good Pokemon to have against the Golden Go because you resist both of the attacks, right? So Zach's going to need to play really well with Golden Go, I think, in order to mount a comeback after a quick early start for Wolf.
Well, it's going to be a Make It Rain, so that +2 from the special attack, it's not going to be enough to deal with the Farigiraf, so it's still going to hold on with a sliver of HP, not before this Incineroar is able to finish the job with the knockoff. So now that pesky Farigiraf is off the field, and you can go for some of these priority attacks again. If you're able to get the Incineroar out, you can finally actually go for a fake out.
Yeah, I think the main thing to pay attention to is essentially when does Ogerpon actually attack into the Golden Go slot, but with Incineroar pivoting in right now, I think from Wolf's end, you have a very free fake out into Golden Go, and you could Sword Stance with Ogerpon. I think Incineroar from the opposing side would probably want to go for a parting shot on Ogerpon, right? But I think for Wolf's end right now, the main win condition is to just go for the knockout on a Golden Go. You're not going to lose to Incineroar and Ursaluna without a Flame Orb. And so, yep, there's the fake out coming out as well as the Sword Stance.
Yeah, super big play here just to try to get this Ogerpon set up for success. And it does, as you said, mitigate some of the rotation that Zackary could go for with the parting shot and just manually bringing that Incineroar back in for extra attack drops. So you're already set up in such a big way here. And this is going to be a big amount of damage now, I think, on this next turn from this Ogerpon.
Yeah, getting rid of that Flame Orb on Ursaluna was such a big deal, right? Because if Ursaluna had its Flame Orb, you actually threaten a double knockout with Earthquake immediately, and so you kind of force Ogerpon to pick a slot to get a knockout onto. I think what's interesting here is maybe Ursaluna could still put in some work even without Flame Orb thanks to Sword Stance, but Incineroar can just parting shot into that slot and then pivot back in for Intimidate. Wolf has a really threatening Ogerpon right now, right, with the double attack boost here, so even if you switch in Incineroar, I think it's still going to be able to get the knockout onto Golden Go, and so I think, okay, Golden Go goes for the Protect here, and so Ursaluna might at least be able to get some damage off here. It's a great Protect.
It's a really good Protect. Maybe you go for just the Earthquake, because it seems like you're just trying to get some damage down onto both, but the parting shot is going to lower this Ursaluna's attack again, and now you have to consider, well, what's in the back? Because Wolf has not revealed that fourth and final yet to Zach, and so you're kind of just hoping that it's going to be something that will be able to actually get some damage with the Earthquake, but it's going to be Rillaboom, and that Grassy Surge, if it is Earthquake that's coming up from this Ursaluna, it is going to be neutered.
Yeah, this is probably the saddest Earthquake you'll ever see from an Ursaluna, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
It's at -1 attack, there's no Flame Orb, and Grassy Terrain is up. So actually still does okay damage to Ogerpon, so good awareness by Wolf to bring Rillaboom as the final one. But yeah, now you have a very free, fake out into Ivy Cudgel once again. So a lot about Wolf's team is having so much setup pressure with both Sword Stance Ogerpon as well as Calm Mind Fluttermane. Really good decision to realize, okay, Ogerpon is the right call in this matchup. There's just not very much that can handle it super well. And I think honestly, the turn 1 knockoff play was just absolutely huge. Getting rid of Ursaluna's Flame Orb meant that it just became irrelevant in this game, more or less. And so I think Wolf in a very safe position now to just keep dishing out damage. But Zach doing what he can here, at least pivot Incineroar for Intimidate. You can protect the Ursaluna, pressure with Fake Out at least next turn, but there's just no KO pressure from Ursaluna.
Yeah, Ursaluna is just going to try to be here to do its best, and it will be the Protect as you called out, but Wolf did target down into the Golden Go just to be able to get some damage into whatever was going to be in that slot. Either you get the switch, or you do get damage down into the Golden Go and take it out. But the Incineroar still is going to take a sizable chunk of damage there from the Ivy Cudgel.
Yeah, and as a result, like, how do you actually start dealing damage if you're Zach, right? Because your Pokemon just are slower right now. They're not really putting on that much KO pressure. Incineroar could fake out into one of the 2 slots here, but you can just Wood Hammer and Ivy Cudgel into the Ursaluna slot and guarantee a knockout onto that slot. If you're Zach, maybe you can consider going for a double Protect to try to get around that, basically. But even if you double Protect, what do you really get off of it? Incineroar can maybe go for a Flare Blitz critical hit onto Rillaboom, but looks like Zach's not going to try the double Protect and just switch out instead.
So we're still going to see Golden Go take a lot of damage. I mean, it's about at full health thanks to some of the recovery that it's gotten from the Grassy Terrain as well as the leftovers, but it's going to be just the 1-2 punch with the Grassy Glide and the Wood Hammer. And so Golden Go just gets taken out. There wasn't even a fake out coming out from Zach's Incineroar.
Yeah, there's just not much you could do here. I would expect a Flare Blitz, maybe parting shot into the Ogerpon slots. Actually, it's a Rillaboom. Okay, so, I mean, the attack stats have been dropped, but there's still no KO pressure. If this were Flame Orb Ursaluna, I think it would be kind of a different story because at least you then can pressure a slot with a one-hit knockout with Facade. But with this not having the Flame Orb activated, Facade is just not the strongest attack, right? And so I think it's really interesting to see how Wolfe maneuvered this game with Incineroar in particular, being able to, go for that knockoff on turn 1, not onto Porygon, but honestly Incineroar switch was really, really pivotal. And part of that was kind of taking advantage of the speeds. We saw, I think, Zach's Incineroar's Intimidate go off first, so Wolfe figured, okay, you're probably going to want to switch out or parting shot here, and if you do, hey, I get rid of a really key item, and it pays off perfectly.
Yeah, otherwise you kind of anticipate like a spiky shield, and then you're just, well, I'm going to get damage down regardless. So I think that's a really great play there from Wolfe. I half wonder if maybe we see the Incineroar go for like side Flare Blitz and hope to like burn the Ursaluna.
I like it. That's a creative solution.
I'm just thinking outside the box here because it's a little looking a little rough for this first game.
Yeah, I think it felt like the game's honestly been over for a while now. Definitely commend Zach for trying to stay in this one and hope for a mistake, but like Wolfe's just in such an advantageous position. Super effective Grassy Glide. Doesn't knock out Ursaluna, but once again, the thing is Ursaluna's not doing very much damage in return here, right? Even with the critical hit there, still not able to get the knockout. And now if you are Zach, or sorry, if you're Wolfe, you can just go for Fake Out again and target again. And yeah, it's just basically felt impossible to win this because of the lack of damage pressure onto Ogerpon.
Yeah, it's definitely been really tough. This is moments, though, that Zach can take to think about adjustments for game number 2.
Yep.
You have a lot of knowledge you can still gain from this based on, okay, well, how much damage is a certain Pokemon taking? I now know a lot more speed interactions, so that's all knowledge that Zach can take into that second game.
Yeah, I think if I'm Zach, I want to be a lot more careful about getting Ursaluna out on the field. Eating up a knockoff was basically a complete disaster in turn 1 of that previous game. You could also opt to not bring Ursaluna. Hattering would be an interesting mix-up here. Ursaluna's just going to go for the Protect, as Incineroar is probably going to try to Flare Blitz or knock off something, but yeah, very free Fake Out into Incineroar. Not much that Zach can do in response, and even if Zach gets a double Protect this next turn, his Incineroar still can't really pressure Wolfe's Ogerpon for a knockout because your only moves are Flare Blitz and Knockoff, and neither really do that much damage, but in these scenarios, even if, a game has been completely lost, it's really valuable to honestly take the time to think a little bit about what you can do in games 2 and 3.
Exactly.
Because I'd say, this game felt fairly one-sided, right? I think Wolfe made some fantastic plays with Incineroar in the early game. Ogerpon demonstrated just how big of a threat it was, and I think Zach's got to kind of reinvent the wheel and go back to the drawing board. So, just taking the time now to kind of think, okay, what are some mix-ups I can do? How can I use my time effectively before we get into team preview in game 2?
One of the things that I had identified from the team sheet is well, if you want Trick Room up and you want to be able to sweep in it, how silly is it to put both Hatterene and Porygon 2 on the field at the same time and say, pick?
Yeah.
Pick which one you think I'm going to actually use Trick Room on.
Yeah, it's really interesting because in this game, we actually saw Zach set up Trick Room on turn 1, but it didn't matter because Wolfe's Furgraph was able to just reverse it. So I think if you're Zach and your goal is to play a Trick Room-oriented game, you need to eliminate the Furgraph first because otherwise it's just going to be able to reverse the Trick Room, right? So, for example, in turn 1 of that game, Zach could have just gone for some damage immediately onto Furgraph. Knockoff's actually pretty good until the opposing Furgraph. You get rid of Throat Spray, but Wolfe was actually kind of one step ahead because he ended up clicking Hyper Voice with the Furgraph. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting because if you're able to, I'm curious about the speed interactions between the two, right? But if you're able to get the knockoff before Furgraph moves, that would be a really, really big deal. But yeah, I think point being here is Trick Room is not very easy when your opponent can just reverse it in one move, and Zackary's team, I'd say, does rely fairly heavily on Trick Room. And so I think Wolfe should continue to play around Fire Ogerpon. It feels really, really good here. And Zach's response would be to maybe prioritize Ursaluna a little bit more. If you are able to just lead it and protect it, then the Flame Orb activates, right? So you don't have to worry about it getting removed immediately. So I think lead Ursaluna could be interesting. We didn't see Hatterene make an appearance in that last game, but I don't know. Screens I feel can be pretty good here, but I think the scary thing is it still kind of loses the trade-off when Ogerpon can just boost its attack with Swords Dance consecutively.
Could also just crit with Ivy Cudgel. And then sadly, the screens just are rendered useless in that scenario. Increased crit chance is kind of nice when it comes down to a move like that, and if you're able to put all of your eggs into the Ogerpon basket, then it could just really get the ball rolling. But we get a chance to look back at some highlights from that very first game, and you could see it was really tough in that scenario too. When the Porygon went down, it felt like after that point, then it was really, really tough for Zackary to come back.
Totally, I agree. I think that was the most pivotal turn in this battle, it felt like, where if Porygon was able to survive and get a recover, or sorry, a Trick Room off that turn specifically, I think the game actually looks really different. So I was really curious. I was not sure that Hyper Voice was actually going to get the knockout based on the damage that had been done previously, but it did just enough to actually secure that KO. So I think Zach's also got to be thinking about how do I like better utilize Incineroar, basically, right? Because Incin was really kind of the answer into Ogerpon, but Wolfe was able to position Ogerpon to a point where it just got into a good spot, wasn't threatened immediately. And even though Zach was able to like pivot in and out, I think the problem for him in that game was the lack of damage. And so to me, I'm really looking at Ursaluna, right? Like Golden Go was able to get a nasty plot in that last game, but even at +2, Make It Rain wasn't able to knock out the Golden Go, or sorry, not knock out the Farigiraf. You're staring down so many things that resist Make It Rain. So if I'm Zach, I think I want to play around Ursaluna, and I really want to focus on protecting it as much as possible.
Yeah, we'll see if Zackary does bring it to the leads this time. Just say, hey, it's here and you got to deal with it, but it's not going to be the Ursaluna. It's going to be the Porygon 2 and the Incineroar, and Wolfe switching things up. The Urshifu now hitting the field next to that Farigiraf.
Yeah, so with Farigiraf out on the field, as Porygon traces Unseen Fist.
Oh my gosh.
You have a very free Surging Strikes here, right? But one thing that Zach could do is switch that Incineroar out immediately. You could also go for Flying Terra with Porygon 2 and then Terra Blast into Urshifu, which I think would be really interesting. You see Wolfe's actually thinking about clicking Trick Room here, and the idea is to reverse Trick Room from the opposing end if Zach clicks Trick Room immediately. But I think the one thing that could really punish him here, if he tries to reverse Trick Room, is if Porygon just goes for the Terra and tries to Hyper Voice into, or a Terra Blast into Urshifu.
Oh my gosh, that's a big. This is a big risky play. At the very least, like Wolfe can kind of feel a little more comfortable to do that because you are up one game.
Yeah.
So let's say we can kind of risk it for the biscuit, if you will. But it is going to be a Terra, but onto the Incineroar. So that could have been the Porygon 2, but it's not. It is going to be the Incineroar over to the Terra Dragon, and now it's going to take the Surging Strikes way better because you have that resist.
Yeah, I think, you know, as cool as Terra flying Porygon 2 is in that position, Urshifu could just Terra to get around. It's like you really want to commit your Terra just to get Terra Blast versus, like, the Incineroar slot is so exposed right now, right? Because you can't stop the attacks with the Fake Out. So it's going to be a parting shot again, but this is a big deal, right? Because this time at least you are able to you know that your opponent has a Choice Scarf Urshifu out on the field, right? It's locked into Surging Strikes, and so the plays that Wolfe can make with that slot are fairly limited. So Ursaluna gets to come out for free.
So Ursaluna does hit the field, but it's about what this Porygon 2 does. It's going to be the Trick Room. It's going to be the Trick Room. Porygon 2 gets a chance to set it up, but Wolfe with the Farigiraf had also selected the Trick Room. Is going to just reverse it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful play by Wolfe. If you do not click Trick Room there, Ursaluna suddenly is so threatening, right? You come out and you just pressure the Urshifu slot with a Facade immediately. Now that Terra is committed, so you see Wolfe trying to just go on the offensive and try to knock out the Ursaluna. So this is kind of what I was talking about in the previous game, where I was like, okay, I feel like if you knock out Farigiraf early, at least like you keep yourself in the game, and that, or not keep yourself in the game, but you eliminate kind of the main threat to Trick Room, and then you can play towards Trick Room. It's actually going to be a switch into the Incineroar here on the Porygon slot, but that means Ursaluna might be in some trouble.
Okay, well, the Farigiraf is also going to get out of there, but knowing that we do have two of the slowest things on the field leaving, it's going to be Rillaboom that takes its place, but it doesn't look like the Ursaluna might be here to stay.
Yeah, and that would really be a disaster here, and it looks like it's staying in. I mean, we know it's going to be Water Terra Surging Strikes into that slot, and so I think if that just gets the knockout, Zach's going to be so far behind because, once again, Ursaluna feels like the primary carry in this game, and so that turn one could have played out really differently if Zach just didn't click Trick Room, if you went Flying Terra, Terra Blast onto the Urshifu, but neither come out, and there's that Surging Strikes into Ursaluna. You can see Zach shaking his head. He knows this is going to get the knockout, and it's been a perfect first two turns by Wolfe.
Had to be a call there, though, right? You have to call that Wolfe is going to switch out the Urshifu, try to reset that Choice Scarf into something else, but the Ursaluna tries to stick it out, get an attack off, but it's just going to be down for the count. Now, Zackary has to find that source of damage elsewhere. It's not going to be the Incineroar or the Porygon 2. What is in the back that Zach might be able to rely upon to be able to close out this game and try to bring us to a Game 3?
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult, honestly, as Porygon just isn't really dealing damage. There's the threat of Farigiraf just switching in to bypass the, priority. You also have Fake Out pressure from Rillaboom, so I think very happy here from Zach's end, or sorry, from Wolfe's end to just target down Porygon, make sure Trick Room doesn't get set up. I mean, that was a great call on turn one. This Porygon actually takes the Surging Strikes decently well, but it's the same problem as the last game, right? Where's the damage coming from at this point?
Yeah, and this Porygon 2 can't protect. So you're very safe to go for like a Grassy Glide and an additional Surging Strikes into that slot, because Rillaboom's going to survive through this.
Ooh.
Oh, it gets burned though. I don't know if that means that's going to be enough damage to be able to finish off this Porygon 2 with a double up.
Yeah, the burn makes this more interesting. I think my question still is, like, how does Zackary actually do enough damage to everything in the back, right? But there is a chance now Porygon maybe survives Woodhammer and Surging Strikes, which would be a really big deal. Even if you get that knockout, though, the question is, where do you go from there? But let's see. I think this is the first question. For Zackary to have a chance, like, he needed to either get, I think, a crit or a burn there. Gets the burn, so now the question is, does Porygon feint to this double up? Because if not, then you could actually set up Trick Room, and Porygon can become pretty annoying with Recover afterwards.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh.
So it's going to be a switch out, though, so trying to preserve that Porygon 2 for a little later. As it's going to be the Golden Go now that has to take both of these hits.
Okay, so... yeah, Surging Strike still does pretty meaningful damage here with the Terra.
Yeah.
That's a lot, yeah. I mean, it's going to fall under 50% here. So, oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
that's almost just
a
a KO,
lot.
yeah.
It's Rillaboom, can it follow up though and actually get the KO? Because if the Golden Go just goes down here, then this is game over. Golden Go is able to hang on, but at what cost?
Yeah, it's another Flare Blitz coming out. I think Zach recognizing, okay, my Wing Con is getting another burn here on Urshifu, and then getting Porygon plus Instinct kind of in this endgame where I resist everything, but no burn comes out there. So I think the game should pretty much be secured, as you could just safely Surging Strikes into the Golden Goal slot once again. Rillaboom can consider switching out, but doesn't even really need to. I think this game, to me, felt like it was one off turn 1 into turn 2, right? Like, turn 1 put Wolf into a really good spot. If he doesn't make that Trick Room call, he's actually in a really tough spot, because Ursaluna comes out, Flame Orb is activated, Facade looks so strong, but yeah, making the call to say, I'm going to reverse Trick Room, I know I'm up one game, like you called out, so it's a risk, but even if it doesn't pay off, like, I think it's still worth taking, but taking it here ended up definitely resulting in a victory, and Wolfe Glick is going to advance to day 2 here in Charlotte.
Really great set from Wolf. That looked like such clinical play, especially early on in that game number 2.